I'm Larry Fedoruk, and welcome to a new episode of my podcast. I was 8. Childhood stories from that remarkable year growing up on the Great Canadian Prairie. Timelines curve and intersect a little. Some of the names had to be changed, but these stories mostly happened as told. I was 8.
Chapter 9, Grade 1.
No, I was not 8 years old, still in grade 1, but grade 1 is certainly a big part of this whole narrative. This story starts like the others. I was 8 and in grade 3, and by the way, had just won the grade 3 class spelling competition. To this day, it remains the only championship title to my name. I've had a lot of runner-ups and nominations and participant medallions, but winning it all, that was the only time. Does that sound sad? I don't look at it that way. I mean, some people never even get a 1. I have that one, that championship. The certificate is encased in lucite and sits under a spotlight in my living room. No, I lost the certificate years ago, but if I had it, it might be showcased in my living room. I don't know. Grade 3 and the grade 3 class. It was our first full year in the town's new school, and I started to think about how much things had changed since grade 1. By the way, Americans say 3rd grade, 1st grade, but I like our vernacular better. Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Sounds like you're moving up in the world, climbing that ladder, achieving new levels in the video game of life. I'm grade 3, but my cousin just made it to level 10. Ooh. The American way sounds like you're slipping. You know, you used to be a 1st grade student. What do you know, like 3rd grade, 4th grade? You're really going downhill. Ours is better, right? Hey? Things had really changed school-wise by the time I was 8 and in grade 3. It was only a couple of short years earlier we lived in the country, where my mom taught grades 1 through 8 at a little schoolhouse. When she took the job as the grade 1 teacher in town, we moved. Suddenly, I was city folk. Well, townsfolk, but no more a country bumpkin. I was downtown swinging with the cats. Or something. Our first house in town was right across the street from the school, which was actually the town's Legion Hall, divided into 2 classrooms with a common hallway cloakroom in the center. Grades 1 and 2 would be taught there until the proper school could be built. It was under construction. I called my mom in the classroom, and Mrs. Fedoruk went at home. I was corrected each time, and it took till around Christmas before I got it straight. I guess other teachers did have children in the local school system, but back then, as far as I knew, I was the only kid in town who had to call his mother by the title Mrs. for at least part of the day. Did that make me special? Damn rights it did. Also, back in the country school when I was 4 and 5 and my grandma couldn't babysit me, Mom would take me into class. So I spent days listening to stories, doing lessons, and coloring inside the lines. I had junior and senior kindergarten before there even was such a thing, which meant by the time I hit grade 1, I was pretty much a genius. Hello, kids. I'm new here. That's my mom, who's the teacher, and I'm pretty much a genius. Any questions? So that first year I didn't make a lot of friends. But here's one of the first things I learned about living in town. The teacher's kid was not to be trusted. All the town's kids couldn't get up to no good in front of the teacher's kid, because once the teacher's kid knew about it, the teacher knew about it. And once the teacher knew about it, all the teachers knew about it. And once all the teachers knew about it, the parents knew about it, and there would be trouble. No, let's just leave the teacher's kid out of our shenanigans. And that's all there were, really, mostly shenanigans. I mean, some horseplay, occasional tomfoolery, sometimes hijinks. Mostly those shenanigans. and by their logic, leave the teacher's kid out of it. They weren't wrong. As a mature and award-winning 8-year-old in grade 3, I began to think about how much else I had learned since moving to town. In grade 1, I learned that Lydia Zadeski was not allowed to say the Lord's Prayer or sing God Save the Queen, the two rituals that began each school day. Mom, not Mrs. Fedoruk, said she didn't believe in them. What? You're in grade 1. What do you believe in outside of TV, candy, and recess? Well, said Mom, Lydia was a Jehovah's Witness, and her parents didn't want her to participate. As we all stood at attention by our desks, singing and praying, Lydia was made to stand in the hall. A real my way or the hallway mentality, huh? I believe that still exists in a lot of places. I mean, the ceremonies may have been dropped, but oftentimes the attitudes are still there. I used to wonder what she did out there for 5 minutes every morning. Did she have her own prayer or song? Did she just stand there, staring? No one ever asked. I mean, if it were me, I would have at least brought a comic book to help pass the time. Upon further investigation, I found out that Lydia's family didn't go to a church, per se. They had a kingdom hall, a building that looked less like a church and more like, well, a hall. Mind you, they did have their own magazines. Our town had about 1,000 people and 7 churches. Or as Dad would say, 6 churches and a kingdom hall. They were all Christian-based, any Sunday, 7 Jesuses, no waiting. As Lydia stood in the hall, we belted out the hits. A few weeks in, some of the boys in the back took to singing God Shave Our Queen, which of course is wildly hilarious. We all started doing it. Of course, the gag only works if 1 or 2 do it, for the amusement of themselves and those in their immediate vicinity. Obviously, once more kids sing shave, then it sounds like the whole class is singing shave. So Mrs. Fedoruk would shut it down, give a stern lecture, and make us start again. Mrs. Fedoruk would also wander up and down the rows to listen for shave. And it became a real challenge for any one of us to try and sneak it in. This also almost doubled Lydia's time out in the hall. Oh, so much to learn. I also learned about Muller germs. Muller germs were what you got if you touched one of the Muller kids, or anything that they had touched. Our version of cooties, I guess. And yes, completely cruel and unnecessary. I know that now. The Muller family, I believe, had 53 kids. I mean, they lived on a farm somewhere outside of town. I think the region assigned them their own school bus at one point. Their attendance at school was sporadic at best, and the youngest one, Jean, was in my class. Jeannie. The Muller germ system was pretty complex. Firstly, if you had touched Jeannie or brushed by her, you got the Muller germs. The only way to rid yourself of them was to brush that area with your hand and at first opportunity wipe them onto somebody else, declaring loudly, "You've got the Muller germs." If Jeannie touched the pencil sharpener, it had Muller germs. Again, if you had to sharpen your pencil, then you got them, and you had to give them to someone else. Once you got them from the pencil sharpener, they were no longer on the pencil sharpener, so it was safe for others to use until, of course, Jeannie sharpened her pencil again. If Jeannie kicked a soccer ball, then the soccer ball had the Muller germs. Well, you get it. God, I cringe now just thinking about this. I mean, Jeannie, I apologize. So wrong. How did none of that family ever come back and shoot up the school? Well, I guess that was before school shootings were invented. The good old days. But you would think at least one of the older brothers would come by and beat us up once in a while. So here's how grade 1 was going for the teacher's kid. I used to like to sneak into my mom's papers and get advanced intelligence on upcoming quizzes. I would listen while my mom corrected papers, and when I heard laughter, I'd run into the room and ask her what was so funny. She would say, "Well, Kenny thought a horse said moo." Shannon has 3 + 3 as 5. Oh, not only did I get the correct answer, but I made mental notes in case I ever needed this information again in school or on the playground. Moo, eh, Kenny? Sure. And hey, it would not do for the teacher's kid to get things wrong. I took pride in getting the right answer, especially when other kids got it wrong. I would proudly and loudly correct them in class. Surely this would finally endear me to my classmates. Surely they would hold me in high regard and appoint me as their king. Or something. I cruised into grade 2, and Mrs. Carson's class never called her mom once. Toward the end of the year, our new school was finished. A gigantic white square building would house grades 1 through 6. The week we moved, we were all told to bring a cardboard box to school on Friday. I think mine was from soup. Friday morning, instead of class, we all emptied the contents of our desks into our boxes, and both grades 1 and 2, led by the teachers, marched single file through town to our new school. In the new class were new desks, a fresh new blackboard, and a new portrait of the Queen, cleanly shaved. Grades 1 through 4 had their own cloakroom, and there was an office and a staff room where both Mom and Mrs. Fedoruk, with the other teachers, ate their lunch and smoked cigarettes. The new school had a playground with swings, slides, and seesaws, which we called teeter-totters, all, at least for the time being, Muller germ-free. It had 2 ball diamonds and a driveway. This was the big time. I continued to flourish in my new surroundings. The disadvantage was that back at the old converted Legion, we grade 2s were the big kids. However, in the new school, we began to look more like what we really were, slightly more experienced versions of grade 1s. The grades 3 and 4s were the big kids on our floor, and at recess, when the 5s and 6s emerged out of the basement, well, they were pretty much like adults to us. They ruled the playground. Well, no, actually the biggest kid was a grade 4, a kid named Dwayne Mitchner. He actually did rule the playground. He was the tallest, the strongest, best at all the sports. You did whatever he said. Although, I don't remember him being a bully in the classic sense. More like a benevolent dictator with a nice sense of fair play. Turns out Dwayne was older than the other grade 4s because despite all of his leadership skills, he had been held back a couple of times. I believe Dwayne holds the distinction in our entire school district to have been held back the most times during his schooling, but he stuck with it. For a while, I was 2 years behind him, and then just 1 year, and eventually we did grade 10 together. At the end of that year, we moved out of the town, so for all I know, Dwayne is still back in grade 10. I remember even by grade 8, he was shaving and driving his own car to school. When I passed grade 1, I got almost straight A's. I think Mrs. Fedoruk gave me 1 B+, so it wouldn't look like she was favoring me. I think that's what happened, because if you remember, I was a genius. And how would a genius get a B+ any other way? He wouldn't. We finished out grade 2 in the new school, and grade 3 began in the swanky confines of that new building. Lydia had a much nicer hallway to stand in for 5 minutes every morning. Within weeks, I had won that spelling thing, pretty much the envy of my friends, as I recall. And a couple of times a week, I could say to my friends, excuse me, but I'll be taking my lunch in the staff room today. Yeah, I'm allowed in the staff room. My mom is in there. You might know her better as Mrs. Fedoruk. And from that little chair by the window in the staff room, I ate my lunch, and I watched those little grade ones scurry around the playground, and I would think about all the things I learned when I was their age, all those years ago. After all, now, I was 8. But in grade 1 alone, I learned a lot about things that served me well throughout my life. Different religions, how infectious diseases travel, trustworthiness, and of course, the elements of a good parody song. Shave the Queen.
I Was 8 is a weekly series written, produced, and voiced by Larry Fedoruk. A new episode every Thursday. Share your stories with Larry, or if you like, share Larry's stories with a friend. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Larry Fedoruk, that's Fedoruk, can be reached at larryfedoruk37@gmail.com.